Thank you. Today I would like to address the recent Cuban protests we saw a little bit more than a week ago. Cubans and freedom fighters took to the streets of Cuba to protest against their execrable and their ignominy-like disgraceful communist regime. But what's most disgraceful of all is how our country and the current administration in charge of leading the free world, the Democratic administration of Joe Biden, has had an avarice to say that the reasons these freedom fighters are taking to the streets is not because they're trying to achieve their long-awaited freedom, but rather because of economic mismanagement. Black Lives Matter writes an op-ed in regards to this, saying the same thing, which only proves their Marxism even more. My name is Anthony Gonzalez, and this is Constitutional Freedom.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight, o'er the ramparts we watched, was so gallantly streaming, and the rockets' red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free, and the home of the brave.
Together, we will make America strong again. We will make America wealthy again. We will make America proud again. We will make America safe again. And yes, together, we will make America great again. Thank you, God bless you, and God bless America. Thank you. God bless
President
America.
Donald
Today, I wanted to talk to you about the recent protests we saw 10 days ago on July 11th, where freedom-fighting Cubans took to the streets to attempt to achieve their long-awaited freedom. Now, I am part of a Cuban family. I was raised here in the United States, but I have Cuban family members. And my grandfather was imprisoned and tortured in Cuba for 10 years under the vituperative government and under Fidel Castro. Now, Joe Biden and his administration recently released a press statement that didn't make a big deal out of this because, well, if you take a look at their policies, they tend to be very analogous to communism. And I'm not calling him a communist, let's be clear. I'm saying that liberalism, like communism, favors governmental control over individual freedom, and that has been the case time and time again since probably the administration of Franklin Delano Roosevelt in 1935. Truly, the ignominies of communism are in themselves things that should put us in a state of trepidation. What we've seen in social media around the country, social media can censor the sitting president of the United States, which I've said before, and I'll say it again, was President Donald J. Trump. Think about that for a second. Visualize that. Conceptualize that. If an administration could be as pugnacious as they are right now, showing and favoring the censorship of a social media outlet that controls approximately 63% of the global market today, which means your purchases, your historical records, social media, oligarchs can see all of that, who you've contacted. So, in a more profound syllogistic manner, what can be said is that social media controls your life. That is communism. I will sum up communism to you in 3 words. Wealth, which is money, finance; manipulation, which is indoctrination, which is duplicitousness; and influence, which is brainwashing and manipulation as well. So, communism has a syncretism of things. One of those things is manipulation, as I just stated. The other is influence. What we've seen in our country should put us in angst. The idea that transgenderism as an ideologue or as an omniscience is somehow more supercilious than the traditionality and the religious values that we hold dear, knowing for over 2,000 years that there are 2 genders, solitarily, 2 genders, men and women, male and female. And now, for a Democratic Party to have a cupidity to say otherwise, no, that it's not just male and female, it's whatever your imagination tells you is a form of communism. What happened in Cuba just a little bit more than a week ago didn't surprise many of us, because I think that the people of Cuba, the freedom fighters of Cuba, have an ardor for freedom, and they want to have their freedom sooner than later. But most importantly, they want to show the communist regime that's only fear. Remember this, communists fear one thing. It's the truth. Because their 3 forms of manipulation, of brainwashing, of influence, and of wealth, syllogistically, logically, fear one thing, and that's the truth. Because all they do is say things that are the antipode of the truth. So, it's been 62 years since the Cuban people have had their freedom. In 19, so Fidel came into power in 1959. So 1958 was the last year that the Cuban people had freedom. There were American businesses in Cuba. Hershey had an operations in Cuba. And Cuba truly was remarkable. It was labeled at the time as one of the more elegant and one of the more opportunist places in the entire planet. Now, last time I went to Cuba was approximately 3 or 4 years ago. The buildings were in cataclysmic destruction. So you would look at the buildings and you would look at how people were living. They had no food, no electricity. The kids in Cuba, I see kids my age nowadays who seem to have a yen for communism. They say somehow communism in itself isn't necessarily calamitous. I'm going to tell those same people, go live in Cuba, go live in socialism, go live in communism. AOC and Bernie Sanders, 2 known socialists, said that the problem in Cuba is the blockade. The United States must unequivocally say to the world that we will never trade with people who brutalize their citizens and who imprison their citizens for executing what we know here in the United States to be a First Amendment right to freedom of speech. The United States must never negotiate with terrorists. The United States must never negotiate with communists. It's as facile as that. Because we, the United States, are the leader of the free world. We promote peace, we ensure peace, and we establish peace here and in the rest of the world, and we've done that since the gestation, since the commencement of our Constitution and the ratification of our independence in 1776. The United States must stand for a beacon of hope. And Joe Biden, and again, I'm going to say this, I don't care if you're Democrat or Republican. If you are President of the United States, you must unequivocally say that communism in itself is inappropriate, that it's disgraceful, and communists are people who should be ashamed of themselves because what they represent is Marxism. Marxism indubitably doesn't work, it's failed, and it's brutalization, as we've seen in Nazi Germany, as we've seen in Cuba, should never be accepted by a society. It should never be allowed in the United States. See, when it comes to censorship, it's a little bit tricky. The United States must censor any and all communists who are trying to utilize or euphemize a means of manipulation and impose it on children, such as transgenderism. That is the ideology that they want to utilize today. And the United States government should tell those people, you are not allowed to have a platform until you turn to honesty and until you turn to Americanism rather than a means of communism. That's how the United States should operate. But we know that the weak and frail administration of Joe Biden will never, and I would like for them to have some sort of a desire, a small desire or a broadly nagging desire to tell the communist regime in Cuba, if you brutalize your citizens once again, we will come for you and we will show fury and wrath in our forces, and we were going to impose that wrath and that acrimoniousness on you, and your reign will come to an end, because we as the leaders of the free world stand with the freedom fighters of Cuba. We stand for peace, we stand for freedom, and we stand for liberty. Now, Joe Biden and his administration recently said, and Joe Biden had, I'd say, a diminutive and a dearth press conference in which he said the reason that this was happening was because of economic mismanagement or because of a devoid amount of COVID vaccines. And this in itself couldn't be much more charlatan. It couldn't be much more duplicitous. It couldn't be much more of a sophistry. It couldn't be much more of a lie. Let's put Joe Biden saying these remarks just a couple of days ago.
I want to start by recognizing the remarkable protests that are taking place in Cuba. With the Cuban people demanding their freedom from an authoritarian regime. And I don't think we've seen anything like this protest in a long, long time, if quite frankly ever. The United States stands firmly with the people of Cuba as they assert their universal rights. And we call on the government of Cuba to refrain from violence or attempts to silence the voice of the people of Cuba. And we're also closely following the developments in Haiti in the wake of the horrific assassination of the president that recently took place. The people of Haiti deserve peace and security, and Haiti's political leaders need to come together for the good of their country. Over the weekend, I dispatched a high-level expert delegation to assess the situation and to determine where the United States can offer our support. And finally, as a close neighbor and friend of the people of both Cuba and Haiti, the United States stands ready to continue to provide assistance, and I'll have more for you as we move.
Now, as you saw there, the President of the United States, instead of unequivocally saying that Cuba and the freedom fighters of Cuba have endured communism for 62 years, and that the United States, as the leader of the free world, must never be hesitant, must never be truculent to go ahead and preserve the peace in the world, Joe Biden basically overrules that, and he goes ahead and he says, well, Cuba, yeah, sure, they're having problems, right? What's happening in Cuba is obviously terrible, but we can't help it. And instead of saying the word communism, a word Joe Biden knows very well, he uses the word authoritarian. Let's be clear about something. Authoritarianism is not communism. You can be a conservative, you can be called authoritarian. Conservatism is not in link with communism. Same thing can happen if you're a liberal and you favor liberalism. Liberalism, though it's analogous similarities with communism, is not a form of communism. Joe Biden should have been more direct about his statement, and he should have said that the United States will do whatever it takes to liberate the freedom fighters of Cuba. But instead, he defers that, and he goes ahead and he says a subterfuge idea of everything that's going on in Cuba. As you saw with Black Lives Matter, they blame the United States embargo, meaning the blockade we have on Cuba that was imposed by John F. Kennedy in 1961, because the United States must unequivocally tell the world that we will not negotiate and we will not help communists whom have an avarice to brutalize their citizens and do it for wealth, for manipulation, and for influence. I hope and I vaticinate voraciously that the people of Cuba will be liberated after 62 years of ignominy, after 62 years of calamitousness. I think it's time for the people of Cuba, who deserve their freedom, to see their freedoms. My name is Anthony Gonzalez, and this has been Constitutional Freedom.
With your help, we will take back the House. We will win the Senate. And then a Republican president will make a triumphant return to the White House. And I wonder who that will be. Who will that be?
Donald Trump.
Who will that be?
President Trump.
Who will that be?
Donald Trump.
Who will that be?
President Trump.
We have gone from America first to America last. Democrats are vicious. Remember this, it's true.
Who would have thought that within 33 days we'd be bombing the Middle East? You can French kiss the guy next to you, yelling abolish the police.
With your help, we will take back the House. We will win the Senate. And then a Republican president will make a triumphant return